Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and this is just a reminder that shit is getting real right now. You really need to be paying attention to what's going on geopolitically, because you have to understand that even though this is something I don't talk about every day, and I could easily talk about it every day, I need to remind everybody every so often that we are in a very perilous situation, okay? On September 30th, Russia proclaimed annexation of up to 15% of Ukraine. I mean, that's a large portion of a country to annex, right? And of course, nobody's on Russia's side with this whole situation because at the end of the day, regardless of how you feel about political powers and governments and whatever else is going on in the world, regular people are suffering and people are dying that would otherwise not be dying. So, of course, we do not want this to be happening, but that is what is occurring. And within 24 hours of that proclamation, Ukraine took the town of Lyman in their newly annexed territory. Now, understand why this matters. What matters is the fact that Russia considers this territory to be part of Russia at this point. It's no longer Ukraine in their eyes. And of course, Ukraine says it's still their country, so they're going to take it back and do what they have to do in order to regain that 15% of their loss, right? But this matters to you and I, and this is an escalation of the conflict that we have all been concerned about this entire time. This escalation is starting to really move fast because now we're talking about actual, at least perceived, Russian territory being attacked and being taken, right? So, why does this affect us? Well, understand that Ukraine has also applied for fast-track NATO membership. Now, I don't think it's likely that they'll be accepted into NATO due to the fact that they're currently in a hot conflict. But at the same time, this just shows exactly where their stance is and who they're hoping will come to their aid. And honestly, they even have President Zelensky saying now that Ukraine is in fact a de facto NATO country, regardless of how they want to look at it because of all the aid they receive and all the countries who are currently supporting them. And I'm sure Russia looks at it the exact same way. Now, this has ended talks with Russia in the sense of peace talks, right? This is no longer a negotiation scenario. We have annexed territory, we have territory being reclaimed, we have the application for NATO membership, which was definitely one of the red lines that was not to be crossed according to the Kremlin, and all these things are happening, and it's pushing this whole conflict into a very dangerous territory, right? And we also know that Ukraine has also stopped their draft, let's just say, but they're not allowing any discharges either. So they're no longer drafting adult males to join the military, but they are not letting them discharge either. And I believe they were able to draft up to 700,000 troops since the beginning of the conflict. So just keep that in mind, because although they might not be adding to their forces currently, they're not letting anybody go home either. So keep that conversation in the sense of this not ending anytime soon front and center, because the longer this goes on for, the harder it's going to be for even people like us here in the United States for a lot of different reasons. Now, the United States, let's just talk about that for a second. We just authorized a $12.35 billion aid package to Ukraine in order to help stimulate their economy, give them military aid, and everything else related to that. Now, obviously, there's reasons why people don't want Russia to move forward in any type of an invasion scenario, and we don't want them to reclaim countries that have already existed in a sovereign manner at this point in time. But we also have to keep in mind that we have cities here in the United States right now that don't even have access to clean drinking water, and yet here's another $12.35 billion to Ukraine, while world economies are literally falling down. So all these things have to be kept in mind as to why this whole situation is getting very perilous. You have to keep in mind that we can't afford for this situation to keep going forward. We can't afford to continually funnel money into something that may or may not result in some type of a victory. And we also cannot afford to lose ourselves in the process. And that's unfortunately what seems to be happening in many ways throughout the entire world. Look at the UK, look at Germany, look at everybody who's suffering because of this conflict, and yet they're still doing whatever they can to try to funnel their resources into that region. Some might say possibly on purpose, right? Now, this whole Nord Stream sabotage situation is also something you have to keep in mind. Obviously, now that we're talking about infrastructure being sabotaged, you should expect additional infrastructure to be targeted. And whoever did it doesn't matter. So stop worrying about that, because a lot of people seem to be caught up on who did it. Well, you know what? At the end of the day, that doesn't matter at all, because what happened is now being able to be blamed on whoever the country in charge of their media wants to blame it on, right? So with Russia sending their FSB to investigate it, and with the Western powers sending their intelligence communities to investigate it, can you really trust who tells you who did what at this point in time? Or are they going to tell you who did it in order to justify an additional action. And that's what you should expect. And that additional action, likely, if you're talking about quid pro quo, will be more targeting of infrastructure. So I would be very concerned about that aspect of it right this second. Of course, I think this would likely, caveat, likely remain in Europe for the time being when it comes to additional infrastructure targeting, but we can't say for sure that's the case now, can we? Okay. And don't forget, while this is happening, we also have the entire situation going on in the South Pacific, right? We also know what China is doing over there, and we also know that they have ordered their banks to get ready to do a massive dollar dump, right? We know what this is going to do to the US dollar, and we know that there's been a big push to remove the US dollar from the equation, especially when involving the petrodollar, right? So all of these things are happening, and it still seems like 8 months ago when everybody was just like, yeah, everything's fine, right? Even when the conflict first started, people were very concerned for obvious reasons as to what it could turn into. And just because it hasn't turned into that exact scenario yet doesn't mean it's gotten better. In fact, it's definitely gotten worse. And we are definitely escalating towards the possible use of weaponry that nobody wants to see used. And we don't necessarily have an easy way out of this situation either. So you and I as preppers have to kind of buckle up and get ready for the long haul scenario that this conflict is going to eventually produce. And at the end of the day, you and I might not be able to fix or change any of the trajectory that we're currently on regarding it, but we have to at least understand, or at the very least have an idea that this could affect us directly, either in a economic way or possibly in a conventional way, in the sense of something that could be physically affecting us directly. So I wanted to mention this and bring this to your attention. As I'm sitting here at my new shooting bench, I thought I should probably get this message out, because I don't harp on the World War III thing every single day, and I'm not necessarily involved with the who knows what part of the news aspect of it either. But what I can tell you is that I, at least personally, believe it's getting worse, and it will push us into a territory that none of us want to be in. So prepare wisely, do what you should be doing in general, but understand that that urgency needs to be there in a way, and that you also need to avoid burning yourself out. So if you've done everything you can possibly do, this isn't going to help you very much, because you can't do anything else right this second. But you can at least have a state of mind that allows you to maintain awareness and alertness based on the fact that anything could happen at any point in time. And I can tell you right now that I don't live very far from Minot Air Force Base out here in North Dakota, and the skies have been extremely busy lately. And I don't know if there's any correlation at all to anything going on in the world when it comes to that, but I have noticed that there's been an uptick in air traffic in my area, and I will tell you that that's something that I am aware of, because my awareness and my alertness is higher than usual based on the current circumstance. So apply that to your daily preparedness and make sure that you're aware of whatever could occur being a real possibility at this point in time. Wanted to have this conversation. Hopefully it gave you some ideas about where we really are right now in the world. And without anything else to say about it, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.